almost who is here together with me today is Senior Local Lead Europa, another European University Alliance of Bologna, and as well a PhD candidate at CAE Cattolica Milano. We both focused our research on the EUI, so the European Universities, taking different approaches. Francesco applied a mixed method using an extensive survey to 356 member universities of alliances funded in 2019 and 2020, and he received back 105 responses. The survey also comprehended some open questions. And then in the survey, he explored how alliances are added in policy structures and practices within the institutions, and doing first a quantitative analysis of the data collected, and then also a qualitative interpretation of the open-ended answers. Whereas my research is a qualitative case study on one first call alliance in which I conducted 23 semi-structured interviews. And as Francesco did, I also focused my investigation on the institutional level. I examined middle managers and especially their role in context, focusing on how they act upon the initiative, the European initiative implementation and its project goals, and how especially they foster institutional engagement with the initiative. At a certain point, we found that there is a connection between the two studies, and especially this connection is around the importance of staff motivation. So today we will briefly introduce the European University Initiative and its context, and then we will give you an overview of the main challenges encountered when implementing this kind of initiatives, but also how these challenges have been faced, and finally we can give you also some takeaways, hopefully. So Francesco, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agata. So starting with the context, just in case we are not all familiar with alliances, the European University Initiative is both a policy initiative and a funding scheme of the European Union, and in particular of the European Commission, and it is aimed to transform the whole European higher education landscape through the funding and the creation of networks of universities named alliances with a clear mandate, the mandate to develop inter-university campuses, so developing traditional or innovative internationalization activities, but doing so developing a shared long-term vision and strategies among them, receiving long-term funding, and embracing all the missions of the universities, education, research, innovation, and third mission, and service to society. It's a policy initiative because it is at the core of all the key policy documents developed since the 2018 to today. And in these policy documents, there are keywords referring to the alliances that highlight the high expectations toward these new transnational collaborative partnerships. They are referred as game changers, testbed for innovation. They should bring to the next level of ambition in transnational cooperation. And these ambition, these expectations are reflected on the investments the European Commission made on the alliances. So far, more than 1 billion has been invested, and 65 alliances are alive now, are working, are implementing their activities, engaging more than 600 universities. So these that are networks and projects simultaneously are exactly what we observed, how the institution reacted to this high expectation and which challenges they got. So I'm giving the floor again to Agata.
Yes, thank you, Francesco. And exactly this. So when implementing a complex project like this we face challenges and obstacles at all levels. So we saw, for example, obstacles on a very practical level. Very often we don't have proper tools like digital tools, or we lack time because activities connected to the alliances are added on top of our daily work. And then there are also obstacles and challenges on the level of the organization. So where we face policy misalignment, problems with sharing structures, or even with sometimes the governance support. But on a more profound level, we also face challenges that regard mindset shifts and shared institutional vision. And these challenges are referred to as purpose challenge. And these include goals, motivation, and expectation. And this is exactly where then we deepened both our studies. I completely with my study, and Francesco partly because he also touched upon more topics. Before we go to Francesco's part, actually, I would like to already raise a question for you to think of, and maybe we can talk about it then in the end in our QA session. So which of these challenges resonate most in your context? Because of course, these are challenges that are connected to any kind of implementation of projects at institutional level. So not only the European University Initiative one. But yes, okay, let's go on, Francesco. It's now your turn.
Yes, so starting with tools and procedures, findings of my study reveals that institutions, more than alliances, that are capable to overcome some of the implementation challenges presented by Agata are those that are managing this apparent dichotomy between these two words, exploration and exploitation. Most institutions, guided by the project logic, have developed micro-credentials, new mobility formats, new joint degrees, just to mention some traditional activities. Well, this is the exploration sides. Those institutions that are considering this more than a project, something that should be sustainable and change internationalization within their institutions, are those that on top of these activities, they have been able to develop new procedures, such as using the experiment on virtual mobility to define new administrative status of virtual students to allow to repeat this experience with other partners, or those who experimented the European approach for accrediting joint degrees, or those who managed to define policies to embed micro-credentials within the curriculum. So going beyond the single activity and trying to work on procedures to be sustainable. When it comes to adapting structures, well, most of the institutions have positioned the alliance at the core of their institutional strategies, but not to leave this on paper. These strategies must be resourced. And an interesting case, not an interesting case, in many cases emerged that there is the emergence of new multi-expertise administrative units in charge of implementing these alliances. These units are not always within the international office. In many cases, yes. In some other cases, on apical positions, but not in the international offices. And they gather expertise from not traditionally international offices competencies like communication experts, innovation manager, research managers, pedagogical innovators, on top of mobility expert and project management. So, but when there is a change or a revolution, sometimes coming from the top, the issue of motivation emerges. And in my study, motivation was really unstable. Respondents reported that there is an increase over time of motivation, but also decrease, and oftenly linked to incentives or the capacity to give narration on the purposes. And here is where I give the floor again to Agata.
Yes, exactly. Because then, as I told you, I was looking exactly on how you can engage staff in this initiative, and motivation was one of the main challenges there. So I told you already that when we refer to this engagement and of staff in this context, we talk about the purpose challenge, and this, concerns and is connected to the employer's motivation. The first thing that I found in my study is that one main step forward towards engagement when motivation is lacking or decreasing is building trust. As I said, I looked at middle managers' role in engaging, and there were evidences showing that in successful stories, very often these managers solved issues connected to motivation by building on personal relations, on long-standing collaboration, on support. In many of these cases, they referred to build trust or connections to those colleagues who were more resistant to be involved by asking, having personal conversations, and making them understand the purpose and goals, but also the need of their expertise. A second relevant finding was communication, and especially tailored communication. So the majority of my interviewees agreed on the importance of a clear, targeted communication, storytelling to build a new narrative together. And over time, this also enhanced transversally awareness on how much communication can support this kind of change and project implementation. And here another reflection for maybe for you all. So we all agree actually on the importance of communication. We hear it always from everyone in organizations, in higher education institutions, and also in non-project related contexts. But then are we then really changing dynamics? Are we really enhancing this internal communication that we all think is so important? So again, maybe another point on which we can discuss later. But back to my findings, engagement was not only found to be supported through trust building and storytelling, but these activities or attitudes also contributed to co-create and build a common modified institutional vision regarding the initiative, the European initiative, but also regarding generally internationalization in higher education institutions. Last but not least, what I also found was that celebrating achievements of teams or of single collaborators were really found to support and increase motivation in different critical situations. And in my next slide, I have some quotes. Maybe we don't have time now to read them. They're really interesting and they are connected to these findings, but maybe we can look at it later if it's interesting. And I would now go quickly to our key takeaways, and starting, of course, of two key takeaways that are connected to my own studies. So when we consider the European University Initiative, or even more generally, as I also already mentioned, higher education internationalization, I think we should look at these processes as context-dependent and relational process. So don't forget the human aspect, because trust really is connected to the human relations. It's not only about policies, leadership, and governance, even if these aspects are, of course, crucial to the implementation of these kind of processes. And a second key takeaway from my side is also that middle managers are really key in internal stakeholder engagement. They act as interpreter, as translator, as change agent, and as such, their role needs more acknowledgement in higher education institutions. And the next two key takeaways.
On my side, first takeaway is to avoid the projectification trap. So to embed the UI principle in strategic planning, but also on core operations. and, as I said before, to balance exploration and exploitation. So engage both with pioneering pilots, but also long-term integration within structures. So it was quite challenging to condense two theses in 15 minutes. So this is time for question and answer. But Agata, if you want to say something on
Yeah,
this, or I can, yeah.
actually, yeah, thank you, Francesco. Yes, just you can see here the title of our PhD thesis, because maybe if you have other questions or doubts or whatever kind of interest, just write to us. But now, yes, I'm eager to hear if there are immediate reaction. I was already reading something in the chat, like time as a major challenge. Yes, definitely. And bureaucracy, definitely. I can share this. And I think also you, Francesco.
I can, but I cannot yet